My name is Ann Kowal-Smith, and together with my colleague, who I'm representing this morning, Karen Nestor, I'm here to talk about the translation journey and what it was like for us to write a translation paper for EMR. And I'm going to focus a little bit more on the journey of translation and what it gave us in the process of doing it. Not quite as much about the process of writing the paper, but I think the journey is an important lesson for why the journey is worth taking. So I will propose that as my case and hope that I can convince people of that. So before I start, I just would like to say that I founded and I'm the executive director of a program called Books at Work. And I'm a graduate of Case Western Reserve's Weatherhead School of Management Doctor of Management program, where I received my doctorate in 2010. And my research and dissertation explored conversation and leadership style and their impacts on learning and innovation in organizations. My colleague Karen, by contrast, is a longtime educator, but she's also a graduate of a scholar practitioner program at George Washington University, where she received her Doctor of Education, and her research was focused on biographicity, which was the way in which individuals shape and reshape their lives to meet their needs and to face the conditions that they find themselves in. And her focus was on marginalized populations and urban youth. So on the face of it, we come from very different backgrounds, and yet I'd like to show you how the translation journey really brought our journeys together in a very interesting way. So while we were both in school, we were working together on the creation and development of this thing called Books at Work. Books at Work is a program, a learning program, that invites individuals from all levels of an organization, literally from the management suite to the shop floor, to use literature discussions as a platform for discussion, to share ideas, to explore differences, and to really find the things that bring them together, that let them have something in common. It's really a way to bridge very significant educational divides that exist in almost every organization, and it's proven to be a very powerful way to level the playing field and to create opportunities for people to find a voice no matter where they sit within an organization. We started in Northeast Ohio with food service workers, but we have quickly expanded, and over the last 5 years since we started scaling, we are in multiple sectors in 17 states. We've run programs in foreign countries, and what we found is this need for a learning intervention well after people have left the system is really very powerful and important. So what's interesting for this particular translation journey is that our individual backgrounds, Karen and mine in client service and hers as a longtime educator, really shaped not only our doctoral work, but also shaped the direction that we took Books at Work. And so what I would like to propose to you is that although we've always been committed to bringing experience and an evidence-based predilection to the work that we do day in and day out in practice, that it's really an amalgamation of the two sides of our beings, the scholarly side, the practitioner side, that really have enabled us to do the work that we're doing and to even embark on this translation journey. So we started out to write a pretty traditional translation paper, but the beauty of a journey is that you never quite end where you start. So I'm going to share a little bit about that with you. So let's for a quick second talk about translation, right? Translation has historically meant the act or process of transferring something from one language into another. And for our purposes, the process of applying basic scientific findings in a laboratory into potential treatments for disease, and that's because it was really invented in the medical sphere, or practical applications in the world, the way we think about it in management. But what's fascinating is that translation is hard. The medical field has been at this for many, many years, and I think the statistic still holds that something discovered in the laboratory still takes 17 years to actually make it to the bedside. And even in medicine, people are starting to realize that you have to merge the bedside, the community, and the laboratory all in one in order for people to start speaking the same language in order for that research and those outcomes to be translated properly. So what does that all mean for scholar practitioners? So we're really in an interesting place in the history of management, I think, having created this really popular and powerful community of people who have one foot in both camps, of which I consider myself one, of which I know my colleague Karen considers herself one. We're really committed to both. And I want to take a second and say a notice about the way I've structured this language. I will routinely speak about scholar practitioners. And the reason I do that is because I am a practitioner in my daily life, which is really the noun. But I can't help but be affected by the scholarship and the skills that I've learned by studying. And so I'm a scholar practitioner where others are practitioner scholars. But I think the fact that we can use that language interchangeably is really important because we're really dual citizens and we can't necessarily give precedence to one over the other. So as dual citizens, Karen and I never lost sight of our strong preference for an evidence-based approach to work. So we developed a program that started in a very powerful problem of practice, and that is that the educational attainment and skills required for positive outcomes in the 21st century workplace require adults to have a lot more exposure to learning and open-ended learning than they historically have had. But we integrated inquiry into the process from the very beginning. We've done surveys and interviews, even of the pilot groups that started the program, this very set of food service workers that we explored whether or not this could even be possible. So as I stand before you, we have nearly 500 individual interviews and many, many, many data points for us to look at as we begin to shape and understand what it is that Books at Work does. And what's interesting is that we've introduced this idea of a theory building phase, not only in research, but in practice. Because when you start something that's new to the world, you really have to begin to ask yourself, what exactly are the questions that we need to be asking? And one of the things that we learned in our journey, and that came out as we were thinking about the translation paper, is that had we focused only on quantitative study, we would have had to know exactly what questions to ask up front. And because we were doing something that tapped into so many different aspects of the individual, the team, the organization as a collective, had we limited ourselves to that which we knew going in, we would have none of the richness and depth of the findings and the insights that we've developed over the 5 years since we've been scaling the program. And finally, we realized that to do research and practice, we had to explore practice-based research methodology that really integrates that theory and practice into a complex, emergent form of engaged scholarship, where we are really doing and studying simultaneously. And that leaves room for the work itself, but that also honors the participants in our programs as co-investigators. And I'll talk about that in a few minutes. And one of the things that I want to make a plug here for EMR is that because the translation paper is an open-ended approach to looking at the research and the practice together, it really paved the way for us to think about these things in a much more open-ended way. So we expected to use scholarly processes all along. And in particular, we knew we would use qualitative research methods to hone and to improve our practice. But what we quickly discovered, both in the work and then again as we started to synthesize it for this paper, is that the theory-based practice also provides really significant contributions to theory. And so it becomes a very important two-way street. And the translation paper journey itself pushed us to continually revisit our backgrounds as practitioners and scholars. Interestingly, one of the things that we discovered, even though we'd worked together for a very long time, is that Karen's research and my research really pulled on a lot of similar threads. Even though she came up through the adult learning side and I came up through the organizational learning side, the number of phrases that we had in common in our dissertations that were written completely separately really made us laugh because we found each other for a reason. It also encouraged us to reconsider the theories that shaped our doctoral research and to look at them now with a practical lens. It supported us to look at the interdisciplinary intersections of the work in practice, right? The beauty of a problem of practice is that it doesn't fall neatly within the silo of a specific discipline. In fact, problems rarely behave as neat organizational pieces that fit into little spaces. Usually they pull from lots of different places. And that interdisciplinary work actually creates a very interesting set of opportunities to bring theories together that normally don't come together. But it also reinforced for us that the word translation, as we talked about it initially, is really insufficient to capture the actual work of scholar practitioners. Because we would like to propose that scholarship and practice together is not a one moving into the other, but rather it's a dialectical relationship of traditional translation that gives way to a continuous vibration of scholarship and practice that allows us to look at the theoretical context and the social context at the same time. So if we look at this diagram that actually comes from our paper, we started thinking the theoretical and the social would be at opposite ends of a dialectic, the scholarship and the practice would be at opposite ends, and somewhere in the middle would be the translation, the findings that we've pulled out. What we quickly realized is that it's really more of a circle that includes all of it together. So the scholarship, the practice, the social context, the theoretical context gave us insights into theories. In this particular case, and you can read it in the paper if you'd like to see it, theories of adaptive leadership, adaptive capacity, and absorptive capacity. But it also, co-emerging from that process, was a whole new form of scholar practitioner, somebody who does both at the same time. In short, what we discovered in our translation journey was that translation for the purpose of practitioner-scholar work, or scholar-practitioner work, however you want to look at it, is really a single lens that captures both the theoretical and social contexts, and not two lenses that operate separately from each other and are competing or vying for attention. So what did we learn? Well, in addition to learning that we had to think about this as a common language instead of just translation, but it's also a fresh approach to research in situ, or in practice. We also learned deeper practical insights that would help us to shape and refine the program. So the research really helps the program. But also the emergence of new insights that connected theories that were not typically viewed together allowed us to potentially create theories and insights that would allow the practice to actually contribute back to theory. So it's a really strong two-way street. We very strongly reified the power of qualitative inquiry in practice. And for a lot of people, practice usually limits itself to quantitative inquiry. A lot of people believe that numbers talk and words are anecdotal. And we really firmly believe that an important message of this community and this kind of work is that qualitative inquiry has a very strong and powerful place in practice, especially as organizations or innovations are starting to learn from the ground up what it is that they have to offer. But perhaps the most important was a mindset shift on our parts, and hopefully one that we can share more broadly, and that is the powerful outcomes of marrying doing with studying simultaneously. And I think to me, that's the magic of doing a translation paper, because it brings to the fore what is it that comes from each side, the doing and the studying, and allows you to really put those together in a powerful way. But along with those learnings, we also had a few pleasant surprises. So the first, and I think really interesting one, is we are who we are. So Karen and I come from practice. We became scholars. I like to think of our scholarship skills as superpowers that allowed us to be better practitioners, but we can't leave those behind and just put on our practitioner hat one day and our scholarly hat another day. And so all of the things that we had learned, both through our history and through our scholarship and through the current work, all came together to create a really powerful and important set of outcomes and observations. And that's really good. So I think we need to celebrate who we are and what we bring to the table. But also that the intersection of scholarship and practice is still quite messy, and the methods need continual shaping. So we need expanded definitions of rigor, and why rigor and relevance are not competing ideas, but really things that have to exist at the same time. There can be rigor in practice, and there can be relevance in research, because they happen together. We need a fresh approach to the way we think about program participants, not as informants, but actually as co-investigators. One of the things that we discovered was that our interviews, which started out with a very research-oriented intention, really became an additional intervention, an additional way for our participants to reflect on the experience that they had been through. And many told us that having a chance to step back and think about the experience gave them an opportunity to reflect on how it related to their lives in a more powerful and even more sustainable way. So they, together with us, became investigators in what this experience looked like. And so we have to think about how do we include these other people in this job of coming up with what the translation journey looks like. Finally, we need an outlet for work that really sits at the intersection of these disciplines and these arenas. And that's what EMR does, with the translation paper as an outcome, as a channel, with, as Lewis described, with an empirical paper as a channel. It's an opportunity for those of us to speak two languages at the same time to an audience that wants to read in two languages at the same time. And a dogged evangelism for mixed methods, because it's without mixed methods, we don't get a full picture of what happens both in practice and in reality. And so what I'd like to say in conclusion is that the translation journey reminded us that we as scholar practitioners are really cutting-edge explorers, that we are turning ideas and theories and time-worn practices into very new and important innovations by turning everything on its head. Thank you.